Real-life stories narrated from the experiences of R2K, Secrets Beneath the Surface. The guru, still drenched in sweat from the intensity of the ritual, motioned for me to follow him outside. We settled into two worn-out chairs beneath the dim, flickering light of a single bowl. The night seemed to press in around us, the silence broken only by the occasional rustling of the wind. His expression remained calm, but there was an unmistakable weariness in his eyes. This entity, he began, his voice low but steady, wasn't as troublesome as some I've faced before. Sometimes it's much harder, especially if the entity is deeply attached to its host or the person is mentally fragile. He leaned back slightly, his gaze drifting toward the darkness beyond the pool of light. His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I shifted in my chair, trying to absorb what he was saying. How can you be so sure she's possessed? And what did you mean by saying the entity wasn't as troublesome? The guru's gaze snapped back to me, his expression unreadable. In Hindu belief, there are many types of entities. Atmas, Rakshas and demons. An Atma is the soul of someone who hasn't found peace after death, often remaining tied to the place where they died. My role is to determine whether a person is possessed by an Atma or something far worse. Far worse? I echoed, a chill creeping up my spine. My thoughts flashed to the grotesque creatures from horror movies. The reality of what he was implying felt much closer now, as if the shadows themselves were listening in. He nodded, the shadows playing tricks on his sweat-soaked face. Yes, something else is what we fear most. There was an awkward silence between us. My questions couldn't wait. I quickly pitched in. So, how does possession even begin? The guru's voice grew more somber. It often starts small. You'll sense something out of the corner of your eye, a presence beside you, a figure just beyond your vision. You'll feel watched, even when alone. The smell, something foul, like sulfur or rotting eggs, may linger, but with no apparent source. All of a sudden, you would also notice increasing number of cockroaches and ants in your house. He paused, letting that sink in. And then the sleep. It's always the first target. Sleep? I asked, already dreading the answer. They disturb your rest. You'll wake suddenly in the dead of night, usually between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. when their activity peaks. This is their time. A wave of unease hit me. I remembered I had woken up at 3:15 for 3 consecutive nights without fail. This couldn't be a coincidence. The guru continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It's because sleep is the easiest way to weaken you, to make you vulnerable. Exhaustion leads to confusion. Confusion leads to fear. And fear, that's where they get in. His words left me unsettled, as if the very air around us had grown heavier. What happens in the worst cases? If someone can't fight it off? He hesitated, his expression darkening. In some cases, the entity only responds to violence. My men have had to physically restrain people, sometimes worse. There are entities that crave pain, and those are the ones we fear most. He shifted in his chair, clearly unwilling to say more. I quickly changed the subject, feeling the tension between us. What about my friend's cousin? What happened to her? The guru sighed. It started on the terrace. After her bath, her hair loose, she was vulnerable. She witnessed a funeral procession, a body being carried away. That's when the Atma saw her. It became infatuated, drawn to her vulnerability and her fear. My stomach churned. They can fall in love with us? The idea sounded absurd, yet terrifyingly real. The guru nodded solemnly. Yes, it's not unheard of. In the past, people stayed inside after dark, knowing that entities roamed the night, seeking what they could latch onto. They're drawn to the vulnerable, and to the dark. I glanced around at the encroaching night, feeling suddenly exposed. But we're sitting out here. Isn't that dangerous? He gave me a wry smile. Times are different now. And besides, you're stronger than you think. It's not so easy for them to get to you. I wasn't sure if he truly believed that, or if he was trying to reassure me. But what about mental health? Couldn't this just be in her mind? The guru's expression grew more thoughtful. In many cases, yes, an overactive imagination, mental illness, even split personalities, they can all be mistaken for possession. In such cases, it's about making the person believe in the exorcism, tricking the mind into healing itself. But there are times when it's not just the mind. There are cases where something much darker is at play. He paused, looking away for a moment. Fear. Fear is the key. It can make even a small problem seem insurmountable. The more afraid you are, the easier it is for them to take hold. I felt a shiver run through me. His words were too close to home, too much like what I had been feeling. Before I could ask more, the guru abruptly changed the topic. I need to meet your family, he said, his tone shifting. There's something about your house, some negative energy I sensed earlier. I hesitated. I haven't told my parents about you. They don't know I came here. The guru smiled knowingly. I suspected as much. No calls from your parents all day. But it's for the best. I'll come to your house tomorrow, as your friend's uncle. We'll discuss this with your father. If he's open to it, we can cleanse the house. It'll only take about 30 minutes. And then the negative energy will be gone. Relief washed over me. Finally, there was a chance to put an end to everything that had been happening at home. Thank you, I said, standing to leave. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Remember, fear's the enemy. Stay strong. As I walked home through the darkness, I felt an unfamiliar sense of confidence. The sounds of the night no longer filled me with dread. Every whisper of the wind, every shadow felt insignificant. The guru's words echoed in my mind, stay strong. When I reached home, my parents were waiting, concerned that I was late. I quickly made up a story about playing video games, careful not to mention the guru. Tomorrow would be soon enough for that conversation. The next morning, over breakfast, I casually told them about the guru, framing him as my friend's uncle. My father's face darkened immediately. Why would you invite a stranger into our home? He demanded. He sensed something off about the house, I explained. Negative energy. Predictably, my father's anger flared. He hated the idea of discussing personal matters with outsiders, let alone something as serious as this. But after a tense few minutes of arguing, he finally relented. Fine, he grumbled. But he better have a good explanation. I nodded, relieved. Tomorrow, the guru would come, and with him, perhaps the peace we so desperately needed.